Karoline Leavitt had always been a polarizing figure in American politics. A young and brash voice on the far right whose calculated provocations often made the headlines. But on this day, the atmosphere inside the panel room in Washington was thick enough to taste. The political summit was televised nationally, a rare event where high-profile political figures, journalists, and former intelligence officials shared the stage to discuss America's future in the age of global uncertainty. Kash Patel, the former chief of staff at the Department of Defense, and a man of precise words and measured presence, sat just 2 seats away from her, listening intently as she launched into one of her trademark tirades about protecting American identity. Cameras rolled, reporters scribbled notes, and the faint hum of air conditioning competed with the tense hush of the crowd. Leavitt, dressed in a sharp navy suit and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, pivoted toward Patel mid-sentence, her tone shifting from generic political rhetoric into something darker, more personal. "You know, Kash," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, maybe. You'd understand what it means to be American if you went back to India and figured out where you really come from." The words landed like a gunshot in the still air. There was a collective intake of breath from the audience. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze for a fraction of a second. A low murmur rippled through the hall, journalists glancing at each other in disbelief as the slur echoed in the minds of everyone present. Patel didn't move at first. His eyes stayed fixed on her with the same steady, unblinking calm he used when facing down hostile committee hearings. But beneath that stillness was a current of something far stronger resolve, the kind born from years of navigating the corridors of power where his heritage had too often been weaponized against him. Leavitt leaned back, clearly satisfied with her remark, as if expecting him to bristle a retreat, but the silence that followed became heavier with every passing second. Kash slowly adjusted his tie, leaned forward toward his microphone, and the faintest trace of a smile crossed his face. "Karoline," he began, his voice even but carrying the kind of weight that made every person in the room instinctively lean in. "You just told me to go back to a country my parents left before you were even born. My parents came here with nothing but hope and a belief in the promise of America, promise I've spent my entire career defending. And while you were rehearsing your sound bites for cable news, I was tracking terrorists who wanted to destroy this country. I've been in war zones, in intelligence briefings, in situations where the stakes were far higher than your approval ratings. So if you think my skin color, or my family's birthplace, makes me any less American, maybe you're the one who doesn't understand what it means to belong here." His words cut through the room like a blade, not because they were shouted, but because they were delivered with the devastating precision of truth. Camera zoomed in on Leavitt's face as her confident smirk faltered, her posture stiffening ever so slightly. The murmurs grew louder now, journalists already texting editors, tweets firing off in real time. Patel wasn't finished. "And for the record," he continued, "America doesn't belong to you, to me, or to any one group. It belongs to all of us. That's the difference between patriotism and ownership, Karoline. One unites, the other divides. You should think about which side of that you want to be on." The room erupted not into applause, not yet, but into a charged silence that said everything. Every person there knew they had just witnessed a moment that would echo far beyond these walls. What happened next was something even Patel couldn't have predicted. The clip of Leavitt's insult and his measured, devastating response was uploaded to social media within minutes. And by the time the panel wrapped up an hour later, it had already gone viral. On Twitter, hashtags like hashtag Kash Patel and hashtag Go Back to India trended nationwide. But they weren't trending the way Leavitt might have hoped. Commentators from across the political spectrum, Democrats, independents, and even some Republicans condemned. Her remark is not just unprofessional, but fundamentally un-American. News networks broke into programming to replay the moment, splicing it with Patel's resume and service record, contrasting his lifetime of dedication to the nation with Leavitt's short, sensationalist political career. By evening, it wasn't just the political class talking. Celebrities, veterans, and ordinary Americans were weighing in. A retired Navy SEAL posted a video saying, I've fought alongside men like Kash Patel who bled for this country. If you think where they came from makes them less American, you don't know a damn thing about the flag you're waving." Meanwhile, Leavitt's own team went into frantic damage control mode, releasing a vague statement about misinterpreted words and passionate debate, but it only made things worse. The public wasn't buying it. At one point, a CNN anchor replayed the footage in slow motion, analyzing her body language in the moments after she said it, noting the self-satisfied lean back in her chair as if she were waiting for the insult to land. Patel, meanwhile, avoided the media frenzy altogether. He didn't do the morning shows, didn't issue a tweet, didn't post a video. He went about his schedule as planned, attending a veterans fundraiser that night where he spoke about unity, service, and the dangers of letting hate define political discourse. The people in that room gave him a standing ovation before he even reached the podium. By midnight, his words from the panel had been transcribed, printed on posters, and shared millions of times online. "America doesn't belong to you, it belongs to all of us," became the phrase of the day. Plastered across timelines, headlines, and even hastily printed t-shirts. The cultural impact was immediate, the narrative shifting away from Leavitt's calculated provocation to Patel's masterclass in grace under fire. Even those who didn't agree with his politics were forced to admit this was how you handle an attack. The following morning brought an entirely new wave of consequences. Networks played the clip on repeat, but now with reaction panels dissecting the deeper implications. Civil rights leaders praised Patel for not only defending himself but also reframing the conversation toward unity. Historians drew parallels to past moments when political figures had been publicly challenged on their prejudice, and how those moments had often marked turning points in public sentiment. By contrast, Leavitt was nowhere to be found. Her social media accounts were silent, her public schedule mysteriously cleared, and whispers began circulating in D.C. that key donors were reconsidering their support. The fallout wasn't just political, it was personal. Former colleagues and allies began distancing themselves, offering carefully worded statements about disagreeing with her choice of words or valuing diversity in the conservative movement. A particularly brutal op-ed in the Washington Post argued that Leavitt's comment had revealed the fragility of her vision for America, vision so narrow that it cannot imagine an American whose roots extend beyond its borders. The more the story spread, the more it became a referendum on the very idea of American identity, a question that resonated far beyond the Beltway. In coffee shops in Chicago, diners in Texas, and subway cars in New York, strangers were talking about Kash Patel not just as a political figure, but as a symbol of something larger. Videos surfaced of teachers using his response as a discussion point in classrooms, asking students what it means to be American. Meanwhile, Patel himself continued to stay above the fray, quietly meeting with community leaders, veterans groups, and young people interested in public service. When a reporter finally cornered him outside a meeting in Philadelphia and asked if he had anything to say to Leavitt, he paused, smiled faintly, and replied, "I already said it yesterday, and I meant every word." It was that restraint, that refusal to escalate the feud into a circus, that made his response all the more powerful. Leavitt's insult had been designed to diminish him, but instead, it had elevated him to a place in the national conversation she could never have predicted. By the end of the week, the political consequences for Karoline Leavitt were undeniable. Multiple organizations rescinded invitations for her to speak at upcoming events, citing concerns over community impact and shared values. A major donor who had previously contributed heavily to her campaigns announced publicly that they would be redirecting their funds to organizations promoting diversity in politics. Move that was widely interpreted as a direct rebuke. Conservative talk radio hosts debated whether she had gone too far and if such rhetoric had any place in modern political discourse, with many reluctantly concluding that, at minimum, the optics were disastrous. Social media wasn't any kinder. Memes depicting Patel as a calm, unshakable force in the face of prejudice flooded platforms, often accompanied by captions like, "This is how you win an argument without raising your voice." Meanwhile, Patel's public image transformed, almost overnight. Invitations poured in for him to appear on primetime shows, deliver keynote speeches, and contribute op-eds. Many from outlets that had previously been critical of him, yet, true to form, he accepted only a handful, preferring instead to let the moment speak for itself. When he did appear, his message remained consistent. America's strength comes from its diversity, and its unity comes from mutual respect. If you want to debate policy, I'm here for it, he told one interviewer. If you want to question my ideas, that's fair. But if you want to question whether I belong here, you've already lost the argument. It was a simple statement, but it resonated deeply, not because it was new, but because it was said in a moment when it mattered most. The panel confrontation would go down in political history not for its ugliness, but for the way one man's dignity and restraint turned an insult into a rallying cry for millions. And as America continued to wrestle with questions of identity and belonging, Kash Patel's quiet strength stood as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful way to fight back is to stand tall, speak truth, and let the world decide which voice it wants to follow.